They say that some stories are more interesting when started from the end. Hence, here I am gracefully removing from my workstation this Asus GeForce GTX 1660 Super, the tough gaming model, which has just undergone a rigorous 2 months testing and lived to tell the tale. During that time, it became more apparent that the GTX 1660 Super was no ordinary graphics card that I could simply produce the usual benchmarking content. And the truth is that I couldn't find the point of making another video replica based on bigger, stronger, faster tech YouTube channels that had already done this type of content countless times before me. So, besides the commonly preset video settings used under the common benchmarking routine, I decided to throw in also my own secret sauce of optimized settings, which in my view it is the ideal way to run some of the most known modern PC games on a GTX 1660 Super nowadays. At this point you might be wondering why I'm describing computer component as a hero, and actually you may find it somewhat ridiculous. However, allow me to explain. By using a question in my statement, I am acknowledging the possibility that my opinion may be not aligned with yours, hence making the argument less assertive and possibly more likable. Hence, leave a like if you like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and etc, etc, etc. Regarding the use of the term hero, this needs more elaboration. In fact, we need to go back to 2019, just before the pandemic and the ensuing surge of GPU prices. At that time, Nvidia introduced two major marketing tactics. The first was to overwhelm consumers with a plethora of different SKUs, causing even the most tech-savvy to scratch their heads in confusion. Mr. Huang, how many cards are you going to release this year? Yes. Nvidia's second strategy was to divide the graphics processor units into RTX and non-RTX, which created an apparent difference in price and performance between the GeForce lineup. We've already touched on this topic in a previous video, where we came to the conclusion that the 16 series remained rooted in the old Turing architecture and didn't evolve like the RTX series did. Instead, what we've seen since then is both Nvidia and AMD targeting budget-conscious consumers with overpriced low-tier cards, which have been widely criticized by the tech community as after scalpers pandemic too soon jokes compared to older but more sufficient low-tier GPUs. The current market situation only underscores the need for affordable GTX or RX graphics cards that are capable of delivering solid 1080p performance, utilizing fully all the technological advancements of the latest architectures. In fact, the last decent GTX graphics card that could offer performance somewhat close to that of a low-range RTX card was the GTX 1660 Super, released in October 2019 at an MSRP of $230. To put it simply, the GTX 1660 Super is quite similar to the slightly cheaper GTX 1660, but it carries the faster 6GB GDDR6 instead of GDDR5 memory. Additionally, both the memory and core frequencies of the 1660 Super are higher than the Ti model, which cost an extra $45. While the Ti model does come with 10% more CUDA cores, streaming multiprocessors, texture units and cache capacity, their performance difference is relatively minor. And that concludes Nvidia's plan to saturate the GeForce 16 series with overlapping technical specs and prices, resulting in a confusing marketing. However, many back in 2019 recognized the 1660 Super as a strong 1080p gaming candidate at a competitive price point. Some might have considered it as an undesirable yet necessary consolation purchase at the time, a much needed hero for many gamers who were unable to spend a fortune for a graphics card during the scalpers pandemic era. Either way, all the above belong to the past. In the world of technology, time flies really quickly. What was once considered top-of-the-line PC hardware is destined to become a future mediocre component. Semiconductor companies continuously strive to push the boundaries of cutting-edge technologies, and game developers are always creating new, more demanding and less optimized PC games. This is why, when you're reading the recommending specs for some of today's AAA titles, it can be difficult to believe what you see. Even old as dirt esports games have upgraded their game engines to the point where even the reliable old Maxwell, Polaris and Pascal architecture shows serious signs of aging. Considering that, I was keen to investigate the capabilities of the 3.5-year-old Turing chipset of GTX 1660 Super with the borderline for today's standard 6GB DDR6 VRAM and find out how it will perform on 5 modern AAA titles and 3 widely known Battle Royale games. In order to spice up my benchmarking routine, I decided to provide also my custom recommended settings in addition to the usual preset ones. If you want to optimize the games featured in this video the same way I did, please follow the corresponding links in the description below. In the same place you also find the hardware specifications of my testing bench. Needless to say that the graphics card is the key hardware of the present video. So I bought for $80 this Asus TUF Gaming GeForce GTX 1660 Super to fulfill the above crucial role. Due to some visible marks on the PCI lanes, and regardless the seller's reassuring description, I was a bit apprehensive when I first hauled the specific card. Despite that and the fact that the card indeed smelled something fishy, I didn't end up with an egg on my face, but rather with a fully functional product. Now that I had confirmed my card was functional, and after a quick but safe overclock, it was time to determine the second most crucial detail: how fast it was. Typically, I don't want to bore my viewers with unrelated info, but I must confess that I had a great time running the tests using my refreshed benchmarking suite. In fact, I had a little more fun than I should, which is why it took me a bit longer than usual to create this video. Anyways, I began with a favorite but also notorious demanding game. Cyberpunk 2077 can push even the most powerful graphics cards to their limits, let alone our GTX 1660 Super. Therefore, I ran all the preset settings at the 1080p native resolution. This was a wise choice, since the card was struggling to maintain a consistent 60 frames per second at high settings. I believe that the medium preset settings will be more suitable, as you will not sacrifice too many details from the impressive looking world of Cyberpunk 2077. There is also the smarter option of using my optimization guide, plus a combination of extreme, ultra and high settings with FSR 2.0 enabled and lock the frame rate to 60 FPS. This setup provides slightly lower graphical fidelity than ultra settings, but maintains a consistent frame rate with no sudden FPS drops or stutters, unlike the preset settings. A more recent high-profile release with hefty hardware requirements is Hogwarts Legacy. Hungry as a hog, it will magically disappear copious amounts of RAM and will test the limits of the GTX 1660 Super. Using the preset settings, I had to drop to medium, named by the game itself as recommended. All this just to maintain an average of 60 FPS, and even at low preset, the 1% lows couldn't stay above that minimum number. In spite of medium settings trying their best to maintain decent graphical fidelity, they are simply not enough. Adding to that, the occasional frame drops ended up losing a lot of the intended gameplay experience. I have to admit that optimizing this game was quite a challenge. Trying to get rid of the annoying frame stutters while still maintaining satisfactory image quality was a difficult but not impossible task, and although my custom settings were not as rich as the medium preset, they were enough to keep me fully immersed in the world of magic and mystery. God of War Ragnarok is without a doubt a well-implemented PC port with impressive graphics, but it demands a strong hardware configuration. Despite this, the GTX 1660 Super seems to be the perfect bare minimum for high preset, always of course at 1080 resolution. To achieve a completely smooth experience, I recommend following my optimization guide, which you can find at the links provided in the video description below, together with the other PC games mentioned earlier. Forza Horizon 5 is an excellent example of a beautiful, demanding but well-optimized gaming title. However, with the ultra preset settings, the GTX 1660 Super managed to maintain a steady frame rate well above 60 FPS, with only occasional drops into the high 50s. After playing a bit with the custom settings, I was able to achieve nearly the same level of visual quality, but with a 15% boost in performance. That's certainly nothing to sneeze at for a graphics card like the GTX 1660 Super. As a matter of fact, the above accomplishments inspired me to take the daring leap of trying the forbidden pleasure of 1440 resolution. And guess what? The card managed to deliver a seamless 74 average FPS and 64 FPS U1% lows, using my custom settings again, but this time at 1440p and capping the frames at 60, I achieved the smoothest by far gameplay experience. It even passed the tunnel test without any hint of sneezing. Need I say more? Before we dive into the realm of esports titles, let's take a look at Elden Ring, a game that has won numerous awards, garnered a lot of praise, and to be frank, has been a pain in the balls. Not only because it's a tough cookie to beat, but also because breaking the spell of the capped 60 FPS can be almost impossible at times. And I mean almost every time, except the rare occasions that the FPS unlocker actually worked properly. Conversely, the GTX 1660 Super provided to be more adept at handling the game, providing stable frames in nearly every instance when set to 1080 high settings. However, there were moments when the frame rate dropped below 60 FPS, particularly when the shit hit when things got intense. If you find that unacceptable, you should take a leaf out of my book and follow my optimization guide, which will help you achieve a smooth, uninterrupted gaming experience and make that frame time line straight as a die. Now that we've seen what the GTX 1660 Super is capable to do with modern demanding AAA titles, it is time to see what it can deliver in Battle Royale titles. In addition to the standard preset settings, I will also throw in my tailor-made settings, aiming for a combination of vibrant visuals and smooth frame times, along with the highest frame rates I can manage. Competitive games such as Fortnite require a high level of responsiveness, and if your frames per second are low, then you find yourself lagging behind in the crucial initial hits when battling an opposing player. So it's a no-brainer to choose competitive mode, Pro settings at 1080 resolution, and enjoy the highest possible frames per second that the GTX 1660 Super has to offer. If the graphical rawness of the competitive mode isn't to your likings, I'd recommend my suggested settings, which provide a great balance between beauty, responsiveness, and frame rate stability. Beyond any doubt, the GTX 1660 Super is beyond than capable to open up a world of 1080 and 1440 options from the vast range of presets this game has to offer, depending on your desired outcome. PUBG is another popular Battle Royale title that often is setting records on Steam, mostly for the high number of concurrent players. Unlike Fortnite, this game still uses the tried and tested Unreal Engine 4. One might expect that after several years of updates and bug fixes, this game will run smoothly. Yet, sadly, this is often not the case, particularly if you own a low-spec system. There are some major problems with the game engine. Firstly, there is a noticeable dip in performance whenever you start a new game, a noticeable annoyance that lasts 2 to 4 minutes. The second is the frame rate disparity between the average and 1% lows, leading to occasional frame stuttering. The last was a strange one. Every time the card pushed the FPS above 120 FPS, the game engine would gradually bring it back down. Despite I played with all the appropriate settings, this oddity persisted, or at least that's what the MSI Afterburner kept reporting back to me. All the above was the major catalyst behind my inspiring solution, which, coupled with the strong presence of the GTX 1660 Super, it was more than enough to alleviate most of the performance issues. Needless to say, 120 is the magic number here, with most settings at low. It was also the reason that my testing results appeared rather awkward. And yes, you can try 1440p gaming, but don't expect me to join you in this kind of masochistic endeavor. Of course, I couldn't leave Apex Legends out of the Battle Royale trio, which may not be as popular as the previous two, but is definitely the most optimized. The only discomfort here is that there aren't any preset settings. So, during my tests, I used 3 setups at both 1080 and 1440 resolutions, everything to maximum, and the complete opposite of it are the 2 provoking configurations necessary for our theater of conflicts. Obviously, if you want to match your high refresh rate monitor with more appropriate FPS, then you should lower both your expectations as well as the spot shadow details and dynamic spot shadow settings. The third option is my recommended setup, which combines the beauty and the FPS beast. No pun intended, but please visit the usual place down below to know more about it. Other than that, it is glaring evident that the GTX 1660 Super is more than capable to run Apex Legends even at high resolutions without any problem. According to what I've seen during these 2 months of using this low-tier GPU, I hold the GTX 1660 Super in high regard. It is remarkably good for every sport or free-to-play title. It remains a solid 1080p gaming performer for each and every modern PC game you can think of as we speak today. If you are an aspiring media creator, you can build with this card a low-budget workstation and enjoy Nvidia's superiority compared to AMD in the majority of video/photo editing software. At a bargain price, the GTX 1660 Super is a sure bet if you are targeting the low-tier GPU market. It has fewer years on its back than the similar performing GTX 1070. It definitely performs better than AMD's RX 55 and 65,000 cards, and it has 6GB DDR6 VRAM, which is still enough for high to mid 1080p gaming in 2023. If you are still skeptical about it, you should know that I never encountered a problem with the video memory capacity during my benchmarks, and from what I can predict, it will be enough as long as its gaming console equivalent, the Xbox Series S, remains relevant for all the upcoming high-profile games, at least until the arrival of 10th gen gaming consoles. What? My sales pitch is not convincing enough for you? What else do you want? After all, you are buying an Nvidia GPU. It has impeccable drivers based on word of mouth if you care about tech bro myths. It is perfect for every casual gamer that disdains the combination of the letters RTX. And if you fancy St. Patrick's Day, why not also go green with Nvidia's last GTX hero? Now, if you don't like Nvidia overall, you should take a look at these amazing budget-friendly AMD graphics cards. Please don't forget to hit that like button if you like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.